Hello, my friends, Evolutionary Energy Arts family.
Good evening.
And good morning and good afternoon.
Yeah.
It is evening over here, and it is pretty cold out tonight. It feels like winter.
You know, we saw some stuff that looked kind of like mist coming from the ground.
It was creepy.
It
was
was
just coming on in.
Yeah.
And actually, I saw two really interesting flashes of light in the sky, too. I have no clue what it was. But dusk is a really interesting time.
It's one of my favorite times, twilight.
Twilight, yeah. Yeah, it really is. It kind of feels magical, kind of like the in-between.
I love the in-between.
So we see this quote by Russell Targ. Although each of us obviously inhabits a separate physical body, the laboratory data from 100 years of parapsychology research strongly indicates that there is no separation in consciousness.
Absolutely none.
Yeah, so I was like going through some of the comments left on one of our videos where we talked about remote viewing. And, you know, of course, there's people that really, they just haven't done any research. And they just are kind of skeptical. Well, it's because they haven't done any research and haven't really looked into it. And probably haven't done a lot of meditation and haven't done a lot of going within.
No, they haven't.
More than likely. And then also they could be eating Twinkies and drinking soda all day.
That'll do it.
You know, taking in a lot of fluoridated water. And then also maybe utilizing a lot of substances that you can get over the counter, so to speak, which alter your perception and your abilities to, you know, actually experience expanded states of consciousness just through things like meditation.
Yes, many things numb the pineal gland.
Yeah, and in these days, so many people are talking about, going to South America to go get a, and I'll let you fill in the rest, trip and experience an expanded state of consciousness. There's experiments going on with psilocybin and, clinical experiments as well that have shown amazing things. But we could achieve all these things through meditation if one is diligent enough.
Mm-hmm. You got to have that.
So who is Russell Targ anyway? You know, why should we listen to him? And as we see here, he's a physicist and an author who was a pioneer in the development of the laser, co-founder of the Stanford Research Institute's investigation into psychic abilities in the 70s and 80s. He's written several books, including The Reality of ESP, A Physicist's Proof of Psychic Abilities, Limitless Mind, A Guide to Remote Viewing, and Transformation of Consciousness, as well as others. So, I mean, this is a PhD. This is somebody that helped build the first laser, I mean, this is a brilliant mind here. So this is from his book, The Reality of ESP. Statistical proof is evidence so strong it would be logically or probabilistically unreasonable to deny, writes physicist Russell Targ. If facts alone can convince the skeptical investigator of the reality of ESP, this book should do it. So in The Reality of ESP, Targ presents evidence from the $20 million investigatory. I'm getting tongue-tied here. We had a dinner and I'm like overly stuffed, which,
it was delicious. That was super good.
It was just a veggie wrap with a ton of guacamole, which we love. So he co-founded at Stanford Research Institute back in the 70s, together with their Buddhist and Hindu origins. The amazing feats of psychic ability he details, and they include, while remote viewing for the CIA and Army intelligence, SRI psychics found a downed Russian bomber in Africa, reported on the health of American hostages in Iran, described Soviet weapon factories in Siberia, and forecasted a Chinese atomic bomb test 3 days before it occurred. When San Francisco heiress Patricia Hearst was abducted from her home in Berkeley, a psychic with the SRI team was the first to identify the kidnapper and then accurately describe and locate the kidnapped car. After leaving SRI, Targ's group made $120,000 by psychically forecasting for 9 weeks in a row the direction and amount of changes in the silver commodity futures market without error.
So, when money is a motivator, people can do pretty cool things.
Pretty amazing things. But, these are things, and this is one of his conclusions, that anybody can do. And some people are definitely more gifted than others, but it's a latent ability in most people. It all depends on your dedication, what you're putting into your body, how you treat your body. So again, if you're drinking tons of fluoridated water and calcifying the pineal and eating a lot of junk food and then, taking in other items that are all altering your consciousness in negative ways, affecting your body's health, then of course you're not going to feel anything, you're not going to see anything, you're not going to sense anything, because your natural innate abilities have been very, very dulled by lifestyle.
Because so much of it is translating the energies that come through your body.
Most definitely. And so the odds against chance in as many cases that he's looked at are staggering. Take the 36 outdoor remote viewing trials described with 6 U.S. Army intelligence officers. Their overall statistical significance was 3 times 10-5, odds of 3 in 100,000. If the officers had been baseball players, the expected 6 first-place matches would be equal to a batting average of 166. But they achieved 19 matches batting better than 500. And the great Joe DiMaggio had a lifetime average of 335, which most would die for, obviously. So it shows that people have these abilities, and it can be cultivated.
Absolutely.
And so they've known this in the East, and it's been hidden in the West in so many ways, downplayed. Even there's even basically quotes that people will take out of the Bible to say you shouldn't do such things.
Yeah. That it's all Satan, so.
Yeah, because we've been told not to. Well, if the mindset is that we are nothing but slaves, and perhaps there are beings, very elite beings, that are in control of this world, they want us to keep that mindset that we're nothing but slaves, but the reality is quite different. We have source that's within us, and we have tremendous abilities. So did the CIA really astrally project to Mars in 1984? And this gets into the fact that they do, and they did. And it was interesting, too, because they saw the beings there, and they did not know where they were remote viewing. They were just kind of handed an envelope and told to go off impressions. And they found that the beings that were there were dying out. They were suffering. The planet was suffering. Everything was kind of dying, and it wasn't a good situation. They described the beings as being about twice as tall as a typical being, but relatively slender. So that gets you in, really right in lines with all those giant stories.
Yes, all those Nephilim.
Yeah, so, who really were these giants? Who really were the Martians? Perhaps that little thing about little green men is exactly the opposite of what the reality was. They weren't little, and they weren't green.
Yeah.
No, and in fact, they look like a lot of the people that we have maybe in some of the banking families right now.
Yeah.
Just taller.
Yep.
So it's pretty interesting, and so by any ordinary standard, successfully sending humans to Mars would be an astonishing triumph, a world historical feat for the nation or corporation, there is a key word, that manages to pull it off first. Talk to people right now, though, and you might be surprised to learn that more than 30 years ago, the U.S. military did just that, by remote viewing.
They did, and I just think it's such a cool thing that, so many people can do this, like anybody can do this, and yeah, it does matter what you put in your body and your meditation and stuff like that, but we all have all of these abilities.
So I was a crazy little kid, and I know a lot of you guys are saying you're a crazy big kid right now, but when I was 7, we moved to this house that was super creepy, but the thing that was super cool about it is it had like the wildest closets. It had closets that, for instance, in my bedroom, there was a closet that had a clothes, bar, so you couldn't see past where, the bar was if their clothes were in there, but if you opened it up, you would see that it was actually like an 8x10 room, which was super cool. And so I would go in there and I would meditate as like a little 7-year-old kid. It just came to me. I believe it was from past life, because I've gotten glimpses of past lives in Tibet and Nepal. And so I do think it was just a natural thing for me. That's what I wanted to do, was just to go light a candle and just stare at the candle and let my mind go blank. So it was just something I did since I was a little kid. And then when I got into, my early mid-20s, then I started to meditate on a more regular, purposeful, pattern. So I used to go all the time. And, there was decades where I would meditate 3 times a day, every day. And the last time for at least an hour, sometimes an hour and a half, sometimes 2 hours. Sometimes I would just be out there and lose track of time. While I'm meditating, a lot of times I will be drawing in the life force and doing what we call pore breathing, which is an amazing meditative practice. It's part of Qigong, and it can really energize your body and really keep you from catching colds and viruses and bacteria. And so, it's something that's always been in me. And if I had to estimate the amount of hours that I spent in meditation, I'd spend tens of thousands. And so it's all about dedication. But there are people that are so gifted that it just comes to them so easy. Like, I don't believe that you have meditated as much on a regular basis, yet, your clarity of vision just blows my mind often.
I think it's like something kind of wild inside of me that just is. But I have been meditating, cultivating that for about 2 years now.
So, here's what some of the quotes were from the people that were remote viewing. And so they're asking what they see. Well, I'm seeing, it's like a perception of a shadow of people, very tall, thin, only it's not a shadow. It's as if they were there, but they're not there anymore. And then the questioner says, well, go back to a period of time when they were there. And so the viewer says, it's like I get a lot of static on a line and everything, it's breaking up all the time, just very fragmentary. So again, the monitor says, just report the data. Don't try to put things together. Just report the raw data. And, that is a key too. Don't let the left brain start coming in. Just allow the visions to come. I just keep seeing very large people. They appear thin and tall, but they're very large, wearing some kind of strange clothes. And so in what follows, the conversation jumps around rapidly as the monitor directs the subject to investigate different coordinates, providing other information as the subject does. He describes some of the sites of interest that he notices, including a large obelisk that reminds him of the Washington Monument. Oh, really? Rounded bottom carved channels like roadbeds, and most strikingly, pyramids. Yes, pyramids. So interesting. And we've also heard and gotten, we heard the Kgb were on Mars and they came to Earth. They're the ones that revolted against the Anunnaki, said we ain't going to do the heavy labor anymore. And so there is belief that the ancestors of the Kgb are the ones that are ruling the planet right now, but still working ultimately for the Anunnaki, who are still ultimately under DRACO control.
Right, exactly.
Mars got a war, right? Mars was burned in war. We see they were basically dying out, and then they came, here. And here we see out of Mysterious Universe, a Kgb assassin, the CIA, and strange powers of the mind. And, it wasn't just the U.S. that did a lot of research into remote viewing. And, these are just some CIA.gov declassified documents, just, giving brief summaries of some of the different ones. And, a lot of them will say things like, well, maybe encouraging, but, we can't make any definitive conclusions right now. So I'll include all these so you guys could go ahead and take a look. There's tons of them. Yep. Tons and tons and tons. I only got 4 here, but we could probably put down, 50, 60, 100. There's so many that they've done. Do you think they'd waste time doing that? Do you think they would waste time if they were going nowhere? Why would they have so many different experiments?
That's true. They did have so many experiments that they could put all this literature together. People don't do that for absolutely nothing.
So in the 1950s, Nikolai Ganovich Kolov was a Kgb agent who had already racked up quite an illustrious career. In 1941, he had been a prominent member of the People's Commissariat for Internal Affairs, or the now defunct NKVD, which was in charge of secret police work and overseeing the country's numerous prisons and labor camps. And they were notorious for their unchecked executions and assassinations, and their deep roots into the world of international espionage. During his stint with the NKVD, he took part in attacks against the Nazis that occupied Moscow during World War II, and also fought behind enemy lines disguised as a Nazi officer in German-occupied Belarus, as well as taking part in assassination missions, such as the failed bid to assassinate Wilhelm Kgb, who at that time was the regional Nazi leader of Belarus. After the war, he became active with the KGB, at which time which was at a time when the new organization was looking for people with his kind of experience and skill set. One of his most important missions with the KGB was to go to Frankfurt, Germany, in order to assassinate Georgy Okolovich, who was the chairman of an anti-communist organization called the National Alliance of Russian Solidarists. His weapon for doing this was like something out of a James Bond film, a gadget that seemed like a normal pack of cigarettes, but which held a deadly surprise. The pack held a hidden button, which when pressed would fire out a hollow-nosed bullets, spiked with potassium cyanide, which made a noise no louder than the snap of a fingers, and might pass unnoticed in a moderate conversation in a normal office. A very interesting, deadly little toy for sure. And there he is with his deadly little toy. So he had the tools he needed and all the reconnaissance done. So on February 18th, 1954, he went right up to the door to Okolovich's apartment, but he had a change of heart. He was sick of killing, and rather than kill the political activist, he instead tipped him off that a hitman was out for him. Knowing they betrayed his country and defied orders, he had no choice but to leave his life behind, including his wife and young son, and surrender to the Americans. In the meantime, his wife was in prison for 5 years. This did not bring the rogue KGB agent back, and indeed he would never see his wife again. He instead defected to the American side, where his story became a fascination with the press. After all, how often did they have a real KGB spy and assassin in their possession? News stories abounded about him, and he took on a sort of new life. He eventually became a bit of a celebrity, giving numerous interviews in which he spilled all manner of KGB secrets and tools of the trade, and even wrote a book on it all, entitled In the Name of Conscience, in 1957. All of this drew the wrong kind of attention, as in 1957 there was a Kgb assassination attempt made on his life, in the form of what was at first thought to be thallium poisoning, but would later be found to have been a radioactive isotope called polonium, perhaps the first known use of radioactive materials for an assassination attempt in KGB history. I've heard that the Russians have done that, used that before, so, and perhaps others as well. He would survive the attempt on his life, although it left him bald, a withered husk of a man he had been at the time, taking weeks to recover. So he went on to study psychology at Duke, eventually earning a PhD, and this is where he met Joseph Banks Rhine and be introduced to the world of paranormal and ESP. Rhine, originally a botanist, had become irrevocably obsessed with the world of psychic powers, including clairvoyance, ESP, and telepathy. By all accounts, he was fascinated by all this, becoming quite enamored with the paranormal as well, and became involved with Rhine and his institute in 1966. Here he would tell of the secret Soviet experiments that had been carried out regarding powers of the mind and parapsychology, giving fascinating anecdotes about successful experiments in which the Soviets had managed to perfect remote viewing, in which a psychic can witness events happening thousands of miles away. He would at one time write a paper on all this entitled The Relationship of Parapsychology to Communism in September of 1966. And he would say that the fate of the world today depends on the common understanding by the whole human race of what the human being really is. Here we are on this side of the Iron Curtain, a small group of parapsychologists trying to enlarge the common notion of man. And there are they, men of science and spirit, who are striving for the same higher good. And again, this is a gentleman with a PhD that was in the deepest, levels of intelligence on both sides.
Right. So he had a lot to lose, and he did it all anyway.
Yeah, and he came right out and said it too. And again, I'm going to have these links for you guys. So if you are a student of Buddhism, Hinduism, for instance, none of this would surprise you,
right?
Because it's just something that's kind of understood. And so this is Erwin Schrödinger, and so this is one of the founders of quantum physics. I mean, this is Schrödinger's cat, Schrödinger. So understanding that reality doesn't take form until it's viewed. It's all about the observer. And again, we have a body. It's our vehicle, for this density of existence. And he's quoting, Vedanta teaches, and Vedanta is basically the Vedas. It's the traditional Hindu belief set. Teaches that consciousness is singular. So this is also a misperception, because if you go and you look at the definition of Hinduism, it'll just say, well, it's polytheistic. Okay, well, yeah, it's kind of polytheistic in a way, but they recognize the devas, which can be viewed as gods, but it's known that they're not source, but yet source resides in them. Source resides in us. Source resides in our puppies, Zeke and Sassy. Source is in everything.
Yes.
It's in everything. So Vedanta teaches that consciousness is singular. All happenings are played out in one universal consciousness, and there's no multiplicity of selves. Now that blows people's mind. But you could equate it to, think about all the individual drops in an ocean as the rain's falling. It all becomes one ocean. Think about all the different cells in your body, and this is the as above, so below, as within, so without. Every cell in your body is an individual cell, yet they're all part of the body. And so, we even have that phrase, the body of Christ. You become part of the body of Christ when you embrace Christ consciousness. That's again another way at looking at things, which goes in line with all the mystery traditions and traditional Buddhism and Hinduism. So polytheistic, yeah, they recognize the devas, but they don't think the devas are the ultimate source. The ultimate source is unknowable, and yet it encompasses everything. So this is clearly taught, and I think a lot of scientists, I know Richard Thompson for one, who was a brilliant man. He died a few years back. Wrote some amazing books, but he actually delved deep into the Hindu belief system and everything basically Eastern, and he was equating everything on a scientific level. And so I have several of his books and have reread them like 10 times at least, because they're that good. Ultimately, everything is connected. So the illusion of separateness, when Buddha said this world is Maya, it's because it's an illusion of separateness. But in reality, everything is one interconnected field.
When it comes to energy and light and information, it's really actually hard to figure out where one begins and the other ends. There is no beginning, no end.
Yes. And again, everything is connected. We could, again, view things as cells in the body. We could look up and see every single star. Every single star we see in the night sky is an individual. It's a being. It's a consciousness. And yet they make up an amazing neural network in the mind of God. So like we were saying before, the Shiva basically breaks down to Shi and Va, and that again is referring to that which is not. So again, we could look at Shiva and Shakti as the divine, masculine and feminine to a degree, but then there's also the all, and we could also go into Gnosticism and Kabbalah and talk about Ein Sof and Ein Sof, or like limitless light. And ultimately, as we were saying, everything is truly consciousness. That's the bottom line. So we've talked also about the fact that these bodies are just avatars. That's for this time around, this experience.
And it's a beautiful experience. We're very lucky to be here at this time because we're getting all these upgrades and downloads, and everything's different and crazy and wonderful and fun.
So even when the world seems absolutely crazy, it's just that we are here at a time that offers a lot of challenges. And so, when the body is no longer functioning, we still are, and we're still there. So consciousness just doesn't blink out. It's always there. And that's something to take to heart, even in the most challenging of times. So it's all about how we react. And if we could raise our vibration up and help each other out and then try to pull each other up, then we are definitely moving back towards source, back towards the oneness and recognition of the oneness of all.
And during these times when you're just not sure what to do, just try to remember to just do the next right thing and just keep going.
And operate out of love and compassion.
Yes.
So guys, thank you so much for your support on Ko-Fi and Patreon. As always, God bless and namaste.
Namaste.